republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Roll call, please.
Mayor Holland?
Here.
Vice Mayor Cuff? Here. Councilmember Nobile?
Here.
Councilmember Lucas?
Present.
Councilmember Shipley?
Here.
Mayor, all members are present.
We'll now open it up to agenda item number D, which is public participation. Any member of the public wish to speak on items not on the agenda, please do so at this time. You have 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes will begin.
Here.
Thank you.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Robert McDonald, Palm Coast. The following comments are addressed to Mayor Holland only. Nearly 4 months ago, I requested a meeting with Code Enforcement, Vice Mayor Nobile, and myself to discuss problems in the R section. Well, that meeting never materialized, and according to Mr. Landon, I refused to come to the meeting, which is false. Well, back in December, Vice Mayor Cuff was officiating as the mayor, and I requested another meeting, and I was told the meeting would happen after the holiday. Well, I'm not sure which holiday you're referring to, because we've been through Christmas, we've been through New Year's, we've been through Martin Luther King Day, and we just went through Valentine's Day, so I don't know which holiday. Again, no meeting. Well, since the city, for some unknown reason, doesn't want to play nice in a sandbox and have a meeting with me, I now have requested through the open public records the same questions to be answered. And by the way, the woman who sat in for Virginia Smith, she did a fabulous job. So today, I'm requesting some more information about one of the questions that I had was about the sidewalk project. Well, I took a ride, and on Ravenwood, between Whiteview and Rimfire, nearly 30 slabs of concrete have been replaced in the last 6 months. So now I would like to know, and if I have to do it officially, I will. So today I'm requesting the work orders on all of the sidewalk repairs, and I want to know how much dirt was used and how much the cost was, how much the concrete cost and was used, and the cost of the labor. And I also would like to know if the city has any intentions of fixing all of the side roads where they've been beaten up and not repaired. And I'm talking about the corner of Belterre and Whiteview. They filled that in with dirt. Rimfire and Ravenwood, they filled it in with dirt. Whiteview and Ravenwood, they filled that one in with dirt. Now, unless we now have a contract with somebody that's providing us dirt for free, I don't understand why we're not filling in these corners properly once and for all. And I would like to have all of my questions answered in a timely manner, because now I'm getting offended that the city doesn't want to sit down and have a meeting with me like grown-ups. Thank you.
For comments. Next speaker. Okay, we'll close public comment. Mr. Landon, can you please have all this information supplied to Mr. McDonald?
Yep, appropriate staff will do so. Sure.
Okay. Okay. Make sure we get it to him.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Including, I guess, you want to address why dirt is on the corners of these streets. I don't know how we shore up these streets. We have a work plan, I know, a maintenance plan.
He's talking about the radiuses, I believe, where people don't stay on the asphalt and they go off the asphalt. We have a variety of ways that we correct that, but that is an ongoing. In fact, it's not nearly as bad as it used to be because of the way we've changed our operation. But yeah, when people keep falling off the asphalt, it kicks, whether it's gravel or dirt or whatever.
Okay, I'll now entertain a motion to approve the minutes, agenda item number E1, minutes of the City Council from January 30th, 2018 workshop, February 6th, 2018 business meeting, and February 13th, 2018 workshop.
Ms. Mayor, may I say something? Real quick, I was reviewing the minutes and the resolution for the contract with Magellan Advisors for the broadband business plan. The minutes were supposed to include the presentation that Courtney had given on the previous business meeting or workshop, but they weren't on there. Can we make sure that those get sent around? I
will. They're usually attached in our software system under attachments to minutes, and
Gotcha.
they're linked to the agenda.
I was trying to find it on the download, and I
Okay.
couldn't. Just, thank you.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll entertain a motion.
Move approval?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Agenda item number F2 is a proclamation for Rare Disease Day. I know the gentleman that requested this is a resident. I've been instructed by Cindy that he had to drop off his daughter and granddaughter up in Jacksonville and has not arrived yet. We could just hold it to the end of the meeting and do it then, if that's acceptable to the council?
Mhm.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we'll now move to agenda item number G3, which is an ordinance. Mr. Reichman.
Mayor, this is an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Palm Coast Order providing for the amendment of the City of Palm Coast 2035 Comprehensive Plan as previously amended. This is pursuant to Chapter 163 of the Florida Statutes and amends the infrastructure, conservation, and coastal management, intergovernmental coordination, and capital improvement elements in order to meet statutory requirements related to water supply facilities planning. This ordinance provides for conflicts, ratification, and prior acts codification, severability, and provides for an effective date.
Mayor, City Council, this is, once again, as we talked to the workshop, obviously very important for a growing community in Florida, actually everywhere. And this is a update, I believe, every 5 years?
Technically every 2 years unless there's a reason to not
Okay,
have
every
it.
2 years. It seems to me it's been about 5 years. But
That's correct.
Jose and Brian kind of tag team, both the planning and utility function, and they're going to give the presentation today. Jose, take it from here.
Good morning, Mayor, members of City Council. Jose Papa for Community Development Department. As Mr. Landon mentioned, this will be a tag team presentation between the Planning Department and Utilities. I'll let Brian introduce himself.
Brian Matthews, Environmental Compliance Manager, City of Palm Coast Utility Department.
Thank you. And so for the first part, I will just give a background of why we need to do this comprehensive plan amendment, its purpose, what are we updating, and turn it over to Brian for the technical portion of the presentation. Again, the background here is that this is the Water Supply Facilities Work Plan Amendment, which is part of our 2035 Comprehensive Plan. By statutes, we're required to coordinate with the regional water, supply plan, which was completed by the Northeast Florida, by the St. Johns River Water Management District, and coordinate that plan with our comprehensive plan. And that's typically to be done within 18 months of the approval of that regional water supply plan. And the Water Supply Facilities Water Plan update must cover at least 10 years. It needs to identify traditional and alternative water supply projects. It must identify conservation methods and reuse activities in order to abate the need for a future demand. The Water Supply Facilities Work Plan was first adopted into our comprehensive plan in 2008 and then subsequently updated in 2010 when we updated our comprehensive plan and extended the planning timeframe of our plan to 2035. This update, part of it would be, first of all, to update the population projections for the service area, and that's the demand side of fresh water supply. In this case, we use the low and medium Bieber projections, which are the typically accepted projections statewide. We identify alternative sources of water supply. We're going to identify the ongoing and future actions which the city is currently undertaking. we're going to identify and incorporate the alternative water supply projects as part of our CIP. And finally, again, identifying those conservation and reuse programs. As I mentioned before, the update needs to consider the whole service area. And what this map basically shows is that the city's utility department provides water to an area larger than within our municipal boundaries. What we see here essentially is that the green boundaries are, or the green line represents our service area, while the dash lines, blue dash lines, essentially represent the city boundaries. So again, it's just a demonstration that this plan impacts not just the city, but those who rely on our utility department for their water supply. And looking at the updates, we used the 2015 Bieber projections. Previous update was used the 2010 projections and showed a much higher population within by 2035. This update represents about a 12.5% reduction from the previous projections that were used. So that in turn, of course, leads to a lower water demand. This update was not done in a vacuum. As utilities went through the update and crafting the alternative water supply source projects, those were developed in coordination with the water management districts, with the St. Johns River Water Management District. And again, it identifies ongoing projects and future projects to develop those sources of water. From here, I'll let Brian take over and go through more in depth of what those projects are.
Okay, so as you all recall, back in 2008 and 2010, we were growing quite a bit. And we had a water supply plan that included a seawater desalination facility known as the Coquina Coast Project. And as growth tapered off and the bubble sort of burst, we all as a group decided that that was no longer a necessary evil, not just cost. So we moved forward and our growth was fairly flat. And that's what allowed us to go the 5 years as opposed to just 2 years that's in the statute. Because we didn't have any super growth going on for all that period, the Water Management District was not very concerned about making sure our plans for the immediate future were met. Now, as Jose said earlier, we had to go back to our 5-year capital improvement plan. And we actually, in the first 5 years, have you approve it, and that is projects that would allow us to continue to grow and allow us to have enough water to meet those demands. The statute requires a second 5-year planning period for budgeting that is more conceptual in nature. It's something we would anticipate your approval for in the future, and of course, because it's 10 years out, a lot of things can change, as we know. So, that all said, we developed several other projects that would meet our needs, and as Jose also said, our needs are at least 12% less today than they were back in the last planning period. So that said, many of you are familiar with the term drinking water byproduct, which is developed at 2 of our 3 facilities, being membrane plants. And normally, that concentrate, if you will, that drinking water byproduct, would be discharged to a surface water body or a deep well or the ocean. And it would represent a fair percentage of all the water taken out of the ground for that facility, as much as 25 to 30%. And what we did was we came up with a couple of ways to treat and recover that water as drinking water. And so from a conservation point of view, we certainly met any district expectations right there by recovering 25% of the water we've previously been discharging through treatment practices and such. And you're all familiar with the zero liquid discharge facility down at Water Plant 2. And the fact is that our drinking water byproduct is captured on the north end of town by being blended with the raw water that provides Water Plant 1 with its source water. And so we have virtually no discharge now. And that said, we're the only utility, the only treatment facilities in the world that can make that statement. So that's pretty good, and we've won quite a few awards based on that fact. And as you can see in this last statement, last bullet point, it says we can, at build-out, maybe recover as much as 2 million gallons a day that was previously discharged. Okay, so where does our water come from? This graphic shows us that we have a couple of sources, underground sources of groundwater, one being the Floridan Aquifer, which is the most prolific aquifer in the world. And right above that, above the confining layer, is something called the intermediate or confined surficial aquifer. That's predominantly where most of our water comes from, on the north end of town for water plants 1 and 3. Water plant 2 takes its water from the Floridan, and it's fresh on the south end of town. It's brackish on the north end of town, and we'll talk about that in a moment. Okay, so we talk about a partnership with the Water Management District. They have been working on this water supply plan that was just released in January of 2017 since about 2010. And we have worked with them very, very closely ever since that date to come up with what the Palm Coast solution would be if it's not going to be desalinated seawater. And so one of the things was reusing water that would come from our advanced waste treated water, which is our brand new wastewater plant about to come online, near drinking water quality for aquifer recharge. And obviously, if you looked at the graphic showing our aquifers, it's like, okay, how does the water get in there? Well, that's why it's so important we protect our wetlands. Those wetlands provide a funnel to the aquifer, 1, and 2, rainfall. We don't have a lot of water coming to us from other locations. We have certainly no major river running through Palm Coast. Although, and I'll speak to this a little further later, we have 54 miles of stormwater canal that act like a river. Okay, so one of the first things we talk to when we talk to alternative water supply is non-traditional or brackish water. Brackish water meaning that it's got a little higher salt content. It's not necessarily seawater, but it's brackish groundwater. And on the north end of town, our Floridan Aquifer has a fairly large quantity of brackish water. And so we investigated that with your permission a couple of years ago, and we did some modeling, and it looks like we're going to be able to get a fairly significant allocation from the Water Management District on our consumptive use permit from that aquifer as brackish water to be treated at our water plant number 3, which was designed as a brackish water low pressure reverse osmosis plant. So we were planning ahead way back in 2008 when we put that plant online that someday we would actually have to tap into and use the brackish aquifer that we knew was there all along.
Ryan, I have a quick question. In working with the Water Management District, is there a methodology that they determine when the conversation began about the desalinization plant many years ago, and I knew they were looking for collaborative partners
Right.
in different communities, and I had served on the Regional Planning Council at this time, and yet there was development after development that was approved, outside of our boundaries without the same requirement to actually partner with a desal plant in the region.
Right.
And so if we were to ever revisit this conversation, and I'm still not sold on the thought process of building a desal plant with the energy costs in mind, I would have to really do a deep analysis of whether that made sense or not. But it was always very confusing to me why the requirement was not the same for other communities, and they kept issuing permits after permits in the region, but yet did not require them to partner in this effort.
Okay, so a couple of things have occurred since back in 2008 and 9 and 10 when we were, as a function of the Flagler County Water Supply Plan outcome, which identified several different means by which to provide water. Rather than looking to Crescent Lake to the west, a gentleman sitting to my left my far left, suggested we turn around and look to the east and maybe consider desal. And then we would have a drought-proof supply. And so for us and our 11 fellow partners, it made a lot of sense regionally for us to be the folks in charge of, if you will, that water supply. Many other communities did not have the wherewithal. They were too small. Yes, development was being approved. One of the things that's happened since then is something called minimum flows and levels, which ties back to the aquifer's hydrostatic pressure and how much water is available for the springs. And so those folks are being told today, yep, we let you grow then, but not anymore. And so they're having very severe restrictions today based on what they were allowed to do 10 years ago. And we, on the other hand, slowed down considerably, and to some degree, fortunately, so that we could relook. And to your point about the carbon footprint and the energy consumption of a desal facility, we anticipate by the time we're looking at that again, the technology will be such that the energy requirements will be significantly less. I don't think anyone wants me to get into the whys and how comes of that. Okay.
Thank you.
This next alternative is known in the industry as indirect potable recharge, and that's where we actually take a highly treated wastewater and reuse it and recycle it into the aquifer either directly or indirectly, and then let Mother Nature take its course and treat it just like it would stormwater or rainwater that came through the wetland systems. And then we take it back out of the ground as fresh water. And of course, the least expensive method of moving forward for the utility and the ratepayer in Palm Coast is to move forward with fresh water. So we want to take advantage of that wherever that opportunity exists. So we'll examine that much more closely since we have this advanced waste treatment plant just sitting right in the middle of our aquifer system. It seems like that makes sense. Okay, so I mentioned earlier about the budget, and we have a 5-year budget, which is our short-term or short-range project list, and our long-term, which is the second 5-year window. Now, you should note that while these years are 10 years, they also kind of grow out to being more than that because we're talking about a 2035 comp plan amendment. So we're actually looking at projections of population, projections of resultant demand because of that population out to 2035, and what we will need to do to make enough water for that.
And currently, are all of our public areas, whether it be parks or medians, we're utilizing reuse in? Are there any areas we're not using reuse for irrigation purposes?
Yes. We do not have reuse available to all the parks at this time. We're considering, if you will, whether it makes sense to use reuse. We are reusing it on golf courses. Now, the Palm Coast Golf Course currently uses stormwater, which is actually a water of lesser quality than reclaimed water. I'd rather put the reclaimed water back in the well field and have aquifer recharge with it as opposed to making use of it for golf course irrigation. But we do reuse water for golf course irrigation, for common area medians. For several parks, we have components of the park that have reuse. So we're moving in that direction for sure.
We also have a master plan, a 5-year master plan for where the reuse lines will be extended. The next one we're looking at most seriously is because of wastewater plant 2 is extending reuse lines to Indian Trail Sports Complex.
Well, I mean, I don't know if you can draw out what the cost of irrigation is, but I know that's the biggest detriment when you're talking about water conservation in the residential areas is irrigation is the most utilized water resource, right? So have we determined from a cost-benefit analysis of what that cost would be if we put those lines in compared to the long-term savings?
Once again, I correct me if I'm wrong, Brian, we do not use any potable water to irrigate our parks. If there's a pond, which there usually is, such as the Indian Trails, we draw out of the pond. Some of the locations, we actually have wells, but no, we don't use any potable water to irrigate. And as far as cost, if there is a reuse line close by, yeah, that's definitely the way we're going to go. But if it's, miles and miles to get a main line to just that one park, it's not cost efficient. So that's why we have to have a master plan to, just like any other infrastructure, plan as to where those capital dollars are going to go and where we can get the biggest benefit by extending our system.
To piggyback off the mayor's question, have we done an analysis to determine whether or not the feasibility for putting reuse lines into neighborhoods would make sense? And then my second question would be, have we performed any type of analysis on the amount of water that we lose through leaks and irrigation systems at homes that are malfunctioning? I know that I've had sprinkler heads go off and it's a few $100 extra at the end of the month on our water bill. And perhaps there's some type of metrics that we could recover from our customer service lines to see on average what percentage of water is wasted. And then that could actually be used as an analysis to determine whether or not real-time water usage reports would be helpful. Because if we can eliminate the waste, would that be able to extend out how many gallons are required per day because we're removing that from our total?
I get a quarterly report on the amount of water that comes out of the plant versus how much we've metered. Then that tells you what is wasted between our plant and all the meters. As far as individual homes, that's usually your utility bill. And yes, if utility bills go up high, then people know. And we do every day. We're out helping customers with why does their utility bill go up? Does it look like they have a leak? And how we assist them with trying to make sure that they're not wasting the water. Just a running toilet, it's amazing how much water that will use, and then people see their utility bill go up, and then that's usually when we get the call and we go out and try to take care of it. As far as the waste between our plant and the meters, if you will, in other words, in our system, it's very, very low. The industry standard needs to be below 10%, and we're 2 to 3%, something in that range. So we are actually well below what the standard is in the industry.
Oh yeah, I'm not trying to knock our department, but as far as after their responsibility is over in the yards and
Right.
individual people's, do we have a number on the amount that we perhaps credit back to customers each month in the thousands or tens of thousands in gallons? Or
We, it can't, the bill has to, there's standards, but if the bill is substantially over their average, we do give them credit back for a portion of that. And I don't have a total of all that, but I bet we could probably determine that. As far as your other question goes, the idea of taking reuse and put it into our neighborhoods, I can do analysis right now. That's not going to be cost efficient, because what you have to do then is each one of those yards has to be refitted with a irrigation system that would tie into this, and you're just not going to
Offer it new development, though. I
Yes.
mean, when you're looking at new areas of our community, long-term.
Absolutely.
Because, we're in the midst of a water conservation competition again, and we're trying to inform and educate our residents. And I know the NER, that's the environmental entity up with DEP, they did an analysis of if residential areas went to xeriscaping, what the overall cost savings would be, but also, the benefit of the water consumption and the saving of that consumption was pretty surprising to me how much. It really opened my eyes to, everyone wants the greenest yard, and, we have a tree standard here in our community with lots, and there are reasons for the trees that are beneficial as well. But it just would seem to me, to Councilmember Kloof's point, having that long-term goal in the newer developments. I mean, we're stuck with what we're stuck with IT&T and their urban sprawl planning, which makes these kind of issues challenging. But I think when we're talking about, west of US 1 or those areas that we know we're going to have substantial development patterns in the next decade or 20 years, it might be worth the look or conversation.
Mayor, two different issues. The areas you're talking about, all new development, residential, commercial, we do require the reuse.
Okay.
And that is part of the master plan. And a good example is down south, Grand Landings. We actually extended a main line down there and then required that whole area to connect to reuse. It made sense because it was a brand-new area. Anything along US 1, Town Center, all your new developments are required to connect to reuse. And for the most part, it makes financial sense to extend a main line to that if you know you have substantial growth. The question I was addressing was a retrofitting into our old ITT neighborhoods, quarter-acre lots, and that does not make any financial sense. It would be extremely difficult to get the customers on board. So two different scenarios. New development, absolutely, we're doing it, we require it. Going into existing areas, really virtually impossible to try to convert the older quarter-acre lot areas.
Another area, too, is we have to start looking at the state-level code for building, because they can implement things to prevent major leaks. For instance, like on my system, we had a pool put in, and what we have on our irrigation system is a flow meter. If the flow changes so much, it shuts it off. Right. So it says, okay, you got a broken head or whatever. Same thing with the pool. If the pool level were to drop, it shuts up and stops pumping water around. So these are, and like we're talking $50, $100, you know what I mean? It's not, so if these were made to be implemented on new houses, that would help. But as far as, there's not much we can do about it unless people take that initiative,
How about smart metering? That's something that I had done a bunch of research on. I don't have a real number in my head, but what do you think the percentage of water use is actually just byproduct from leaks and such? 5%, 3%, 10%? Yeah.
I don't know, but I'm what you call cheap.
Same, yeah.
So I check, when there's no water running in my house, I go out and look at the meter to see if it's moving.
Yep.
And if the meter's moving and I'm not running water, I know something is, but most of the time you can hear it, or, in the house you hear something that, like the toilet or something like that. And like Mr. Landon specified, it eats up.
It does.
It may, because it's 24 hours, 7 days. It's, just dripping water. So.
I fixed a faucet in a toilet, and it was $50 per month of water savings. And that got me thinking, wow, you really only notice these things when they're substantial at the end of the month when you're looking at your water bill. Right. But if it's $10, perhaps I would have never noticed.
Right.
Well, if I could add, our smart meters are next stage, and one we're looking at right now and hoping to start implementing this year is a fixed-based reading. And then that's not just for us, but then that's where the customer will be able to eventually go online and see how much water they used every day. And that could have a real impact. And I think it would also help them then know if they have a leak, or how much does it really cost to run the dishwasher? Do you really need to run the dishwasher every night, or maybe you can do it every other night? Those are the kind of things that
have an incentive plan for recycling, where our residents take advantage of it, and we're able to utilize those dollars.
Right.
Is there, to Councilmember Nobile's, if a new build puts in the technology that will reduce water consumption per household, like an incentive?
Our code gives them incentive and financial incentive for building green, not just water, but there's certain points that they get that, yes, they I forget what it is, but they get a reduction in their building permit fees or something. So yes, we do have incentive for building green too in our program.
Good.
If I can add to that a little bit, there's a huge incentive in our current rates, or block rates. So if you use fewer gallons, you pay less dollars per 1,000 gallons. So if you can get your water use down to a lesser tier, for example, you can save quite a bit of money.
We have some good numbers for if people stop buying water bottles at the store and drinking our water, the cost of doing that.
Yeah, okay, so if you buy a bottle of water over at the store, you can pay anywhere from probably 90 cents to a couple bucks for a single bottle of water. And what we've determined is we deliver to your home a couple of gallons of water for 1 penny. So think about how much money you can save if you.
Well, see, and I'm gonna show you cheap. I went out and bought a water cooler, and I bought two 5-gallon things, and I fill them up from the faucet. I don't have the delivery service. I just like it cold, and quick.
You want to talk cheap? I fill mine up with reuse.
So we obviously need to get Tom in here and do a PSA on the both of you.
But the water actually is cleaner drinking water than a bottled water.
Okay, so that's been proven, actually, that there's higher level of restrictions, regulations, I should say, on our municipal water supply than bottled water supply. Keep in mind that many, many bottled water supplies are, in fact, start out as municipal water supplies, that different brands, and I'm not going to name any brands, but they, they go up to the faucet, they fill them up, and they send them out just like that, exactly. And of course, they're in business to make money, and certainly they do. So, okay.
Digress, I thought it was important.
Good conversation.
Yeah, move on.
I know you like this stuff, Brian.
No comment. Yeah, we could talk all day. Okay, so all along, we have these technical, procedural, and programmatic improvement management things that we do, and conservation practices that we do. And to an earlier point about being cheap, several years ago, the Water Management District and we partnered to do water audits of irrigation systems. And so we provided the 20 highest users in town, and we were able to audit about a dozen of them, and then compare our audit results with many, many communities in the 19 counties of the district. And Palm Coast was the only community that the district said you should be using more water, not less.
Wow.
Speaks highly to our conservative irrigation users. So that was a good thing. And the audits that we run annually and are required to run about 3 to 4%, as Mr. Lannon said, on an annual running basis. So that's a pretty good number. Our meters are accurate to 5%. So as long as we can keep that number under 5%, we're doing pretty darn good industry-wide. Okay.
So staff's recommendation at this point, along with the Planning and Land Development Regulation Board, is that City Council approve the proposed amendments at first reading, which will then need to be transmitted to our state land planning agency, that's the Department of Economic Opportunity, and other state agencies, typical for a comprehensive plan amendment. And after receiving comments from them, after about 30 days, we'll bring it back for second reading.
Any questions, council members? No, I'll open up to the public. Any member of the public wish to make public comment on agenda item number G3, please do so at this time.
Good morning, George Mayo. One of the main reasons I moved to Palm Coast is I look for a community with good water and enough water. Coming from New England, water was a very important subject. I want to thank Brian and his team and the city for everything that they do for the water. I'm grateful. Piggybacking on Mayor's question about desal, I know all we hear about is offshore drilling and, of course, the possibility of fracking. My question is somewhere down the line, if all of a sudden they come in and frack, and everybody that is worried about it is that may spoil the aquifer. All of a sudden it gets contaminated and makes the water unusable. How long would it take to, if we had to, get into desal? How long of a startup would that take? And is that still a possibility in the back of our mind, and we haven't ruled out desal completely? We were talking about new projects using the recycled water. I believe I had asked once before, as we have a lot of new projects going up on Colbert and Roberts Lane area, that there was not any recycled water usable right in that area. Since that is going to be built out, and there's more yet to come, as we know, going to county meetings, so there's a lot of property there, and I'm sure that's going to be built out even more than we realize now. That may be something to look at if the recycled water pipes aren't in there yet. That may be a very economic thing to be able to put it there, because there's a lot of people going to be moving in there. And concerning water usage, I have a relative who lives in Port Orange, and I know, reading up, a lot of places in Port Orange households either had broken pipes and the water was constantly running. Citizens were unaware of it. It happened to my relative. They're snowbirds. They had let somebody use their house while they were here. Unfortunately, when the people left, they left all the faucets on. They got a bill sent back to Connecticut saying your usage for the month was 15,000 gallons. So people were complaining to the city of Port Orange, and they now have a rule in effect that if the usage goes up X amount, whatever they set, whether it's 5,000 or 3,000, they have to notify the homeowner and say, you have a problem, you have to investigate it. And I would like to see us maybe implement something like that, so all of a sudden the homeowner doesn't get a bill and say, you used 15,000 gallons. Well, if you had notified them ahead of time, they might have been able to fix the problem, especially if it's a snowbird and something like that. A pipe breaks and they aren't aware of it, they can have somebody take care of it. So I would like to see the city maybe implement something like that. I'm sure the water company knows how many gallons we're using, and they could look and say, wow, they only use 1,000 gallons a month, how come?
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
We'll take the first question on time frame wise with the desal, how long it takes to, and are we projecting a time frame where we would revisit that?
Okay, so probably 2050, in other words, way out there. At the build-out of Palm Coast, it's conceivable we'll need an extra 3 million gallons of water beyond what the freshwater aquifer and possibly brackish water aquifer might be able to provide for, despite the other reuse opportunities that we might have to consider using desal. But that's so far out, it's really difficult to say. And as far as the time frames to implement desal, our planning period, the last go-around was 10 years. And so unless something dramatic changes in the regulatory community, it would still be a long implementation period. If it was on an emergency basis, yeah, you could bring in large RO units that they do around the world for tsunamis and other events, disaster events. You could do something of that nature in terms of the fracking issue, which I'd be very surprised if we were down that path. Yeah, it's way out there.
And Colbert Lane, all the new development that's going on?
You recall if we have a line going down Colbert Lane?
We don't have a line, no. But we are going to look at that, of course, because any place where there's a future population center, it makes sense. So that's what we would be doing there.
Yeah, so because it was in the county and they got their approval rights and then they're now in the city with these annexation agreements, our codes apply, correct, for new development?
Right. Once again, it's part of that master plan for, you got to have a main line down there. If we get the main line down there, then we definitely require it. If we don't have the main line, then obviously it does not happen. Now, what we did like in Grand Landing South is require them to install the reuse irrigation systems. So it was ready to go, and then when our main line got there, we hooked it up to that. And
Well, we just approved a major differential residential development over there, which, I mean, I would hope that we're looking at water conservation methods down that whole corridor. I mean, that's a lot of development that's going to be happening there over the next.
yes.
As Mr. Lannon said, down Seminole Woods, adjacent to the airport property, all the way down to Grand Landings, we partnered with the Water Management District to receive grant funding to run that line down there for exactly the purposes that you're discussing right now.
I think the suggestion is that
We're looking at
Colbert
it.
Lane and State Road 100 would be another good example of doing the
Exactly.
same type of thing.
Right. And of course, we would apply for a grant.
Is there an average cost per mile of mainline laid, or?
There is, but I'm afraid I'm not the construction people, so I can't answer that for you.
But yeah, I
We
think
can get
it's
that
important
answer
we
for you.
look at that. And then the last question or comment that George had about, do we alert our residents if we're detecting something of a high usage, unusual high usage pattern within their home?
Yes,
Okay.
but not timely.
Yeah,
That's
see,
the question.
The problem with all this is that we don't know it either until we go out and read the
Reads
meter.
it.
And if we see high usage, yes,
Are the new reading, electronic meters change that at all? Or do they communicate, or do you physically have to still go
That's
somewhere
one of the
and read it?
reasons we're moving in that direction, so that
we
we
will
can,
be able to, and alarms can go off if we see something unusual in the office at the computer. kind
Okay,
of thing.
so those communicate back?
Yes.
Okay.
That's, now, right now,
Right now, yes, so
we
you
have to
physically
go out
got to
and-
read
and
it.
drive by.
Right,
The idea is to have a, what they call fixed base, in other words, antenna in
Right.
the neighborhood that then transmits it back to the office, both for meter reading for billing purposes and anything unusual going on.
okay.
Yeah,
Did it in-house, like FPL sends me, I can go online and see my electricity. I can see when, I blow dry my hair, I see it go up and take a spike. If we were to do the same with our water bill, then people could, even the snowbirds could look from home and see, hey, I must have left something on.
Verizon has a system that does exactly that, their water management utility, so you can go online. You can also see water usage during the night, which is a great way to tell if you have leaks.
right. Yep, that's exactly where we're headed.
Super.
Okay. Thank you for your comments. They were very helpful. Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, council, I entertain a motion.
Move approval. Second?
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Agenda item number H4, which is a resolution approving a partial vacation of 1 foot wide, non-vehicular access and landscape easement in Kings Point Commercial Subdivision replat.
Mayor, City Council, this is something you did not have on your workshop. We are trying to expedite this for the developer and trying to move it along. The 1 foot strip along Old Kings Road is something that was required in the county, and this development was originally approved under the county code. It's there at Old Kings Road and State Road 100, that corner that's been ready for development for over 10 years now, or close to 10 years. The access is obviously been a real challenge for any type of retail business. So we've worked with, in this case, Racetrack to change the access. In order to do that, this easement has to be vacated. It's a easement to the city, so it requires city council action. Bill's going to give you a couple of the details. This is really kind of just housekeeping item, so we can move forward with this area. Bill?
Good morning, council members and mayor. I'm Bill Hoover of the Community Development Department. In the Kings Point Commercial Subdivision and the replat were both approved prior to adoption of the city's land development code in August 2008. So the city was using Flagler County subdivision regulations at that time, and the county required a 1-foot non-vehicular access and landscape easement where no access was planned. And you can see right up here is where the access was put in, and there's a frontage road that's already developed. And the red area on both sides of the access have the 1-foot, you might even call it a spite strip, but I guess the intention was to make it very difficult for anybody to get another access through there. However, the access is actually 700 feet north of the intersection, which is a very long distance. So the portion that would be vacated would be 66 feet long, and it's this little area right there. And at the end of last year, Racetrack Petroleum came in for a site plan, and you can sort of see it. Their engineer overlaid it on an aerial photo for you. And for them to make this site work, they have to provide a more convenient access for their customers. And the city traffic engineer, Sean Costello, has reviewed it. It meets city standards. And because that's a State Route 100 is a state route, FDOT also has reviewed it. And you can also see, as you're approaching the new access, there will be a right turn lane there. So this access will be limited to a right turn in and a right turn out. Staff recommends that the City Council approve this resolution vacating part of the 1-foot wide non-vehicular access and landscape easement of the Kings Point Commercial Subdivision replat, application number 3494.
Council, is there any questions or comments on agenda item number H4?
My one question is, so if they're exiting onto Old Kings, making a right-hand turn, they're going to have, where would they turn around if they want to go the other direction?
So that's a, right up here is a full median opening right now.
So actually, the best thing to do would be to take that frontage road and turn left.
Yeah, oh yeah, I agree. But that happens at the racetrack on 100, the new one over here, where all the time people come out the wrong direction, expect to be able to go.
But a full access closer because of the left turn lanes and all the movement there at the signalized intersection.
I'm just thinking people are going to be heading up Old Kings, and then in a non-left turn lane, they're going to be pulling a UE at the access point. It's just food for thought. I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah, there's actually another access
Further
if
down
you
that
come
way.
back this way, and that frontage road keeps extending, and once you get further from the intersection, it lets you make a travel west on State Route 100.
Okay, any other questions or comments? If not, I'll open it up to the public. Any member of the public wish to make public comment on agenda item number H4, please do so at this time.
Morning.
Mr. Needlebuck from Palm Coast. Is this the same access road that goes by the school there? Is my first question. If you make a right-hand turn, isn't the school on the left-hand side just about 600 yards down? Where there's new,
Go ahead, we'll answer your questions.
if it's so, that traffic there is horrendous. When the kids come and go, the buses, the people picking up the kids, that is horrible. Maybe you need to look at it, what impact this, the frontage I can understand getting, but just, if you're going to fix something, why don't you fix everything and see what you can do to make the parking of vehicles that are picking up the kids and the school buses and all that traffic. It goes like this. You have everything coming together. Every school you go to, people pick up their kids, you have parking issues. So you may want to look at that. If you're going to fix something, let's fix it all.
Thank you. Next speaker. to address the speaker's comments about,
The direct answer is no. This is on the north side of State Road 100, whereas the school is on the south side. I can tell you that I agree with the gentleman, but that's true just about every school at drop-off and pick-up time. Recently, we convinced Flagler County, who controls that signal, and FDOT to put in a left turn arrow that helps. And then, if you recall, once again, that whole area was redone recently to try to help improve those. So there's been some effort to improve it. Never going to make a drop off and pick up at a school great, but we've been trying hard to make it better, and it is much better, particularly with the left turn arrows. That was a huge improvement at that location.
any other comments or questions, council? If not, entertain a motion.
Move approval?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Agenda item number I is the consent agenda. Any member of the public wish to make public comment on 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, or 13, please do so at this time. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda.
Approval?
Second.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none, it passes unanimously. Agenda item number J is public participation. Any member of the public wish to make public comments on agenda items that are not, or on items not on the agenda, please do so at this time. You have up to 3 minutes. Please state your name for the record, and your 3 minutes will begin. Seeing none, I'll close public comment. I don't see the gentleman for the proclamation.
Mayor, it's time sensitive, so I'd recommend go ahead and read it into the record.
Yes, and then you'll just be able to give this to the gentleman. Okay. All right, so it's a proclamation, whereas there are nearly 7,000 diseases and conditions considered rare, each affecting fewer than 200,000 Americans in the United States, according to the National Institute of Health. And whereas while each of these diseases may affect small numbers of people, rare diseases collectively affect an estimated 30 million Americans, which is 1 in 10 people. And whereas many rare diseases are serious and debilitating conditions that have a significant impact on the lives of those affected, and whereas millions of Americans have rare diseases, but fewer than 500 of the nearly 7,000 are rare diseases have FDA-approved treatments, and whereas individuals and families affected by rare diseases often experience problems, each as diagnosis delay, difficulty finding a medical expert, and lack of access to treatment or ancillary services, whereas the National Organization for Rare Disorders is organizing a nationwide observance of Rare Disease Day on Wednesday, February 28, 2018, and whereas thousands of patients, caregivers, medical professionals, researchers, and other across the state of Florida will participate in that observance. Now therefore be proclaimed by the mayor and the city council of the city of Palm Coast, Florida, that February 28, 2018 be officially designated as Rare Disease Day in Palm Coast. Signed this 20th day of February 2008, Mayor Melissa Holt. Okay, we'll now move to agenda item number K, which is discussion by City Council of matters not on the agenda. We'll start with Councilmember Shipley.
I do have one thing. I have some people here, Mr. and Mrs. Freeman, and they have brought something up through their friend, Stephanie Capehart, who's been kind of like their advocate and has met with Steve Flanagan regarding the handicap signs in the city of Palm Coast. Now, I guess the state has the ruling on it that they have, that we have to have these handicap spots and how many spots and where we have to have them. But we need an ordinance here that unifies or makes a uniform sign. We have some signs that say maximum $250 fine, some that say $100 fine, the design of the signs, nothing's really uniform. So when somebody parks in a handicap spot and then gets a ticket and then has to go to court, sometimes it's thrown out because it's not uniform. And they can say, well, I didn't see this, or I want it to be this way, and I was in front of this sign and not that sign. So just to make it easier so that people obey the signs and actually have some kind of a penalty that will stick when they do park in these handicap spots. I think the city needs to make an ordinance. So I was wondering if we can get it on a workshop next week so that we can get some sort of an ordinance so that we can have it uniformed.
Well, let's do this. I mean, I don't know if it requires a whole workshop discussion. I am curious to understand why there's no uniformity in our signs. I wasn't aware that there wasn't.
I'm not sure there isn't.
If the-
But except for history, I mean, if they went up 20 years ago, they may be different than today, but I can find out if there is a standard today, and if whether it's controlled by the state or we can have some control
Well,
here.
And I think Steve Flanagan has all that information. He
Yep.
had a meeting with them, and he has a lot of the information, and they've done a lot of research. Stephanie's done a lot of research and brought it to Steve Flanagan,
Well,
but
yeah, I mean, I think it's a great idea. I mean, the fact of the matter is, there's nothing worse than, people that are disabled and other people utilizing the parking spaces, and having a father that was in a wheelchair, very disturbing. So I don't mind us, as a council, looking at that and saying that it should be uniform across the board.
Yeah, I think the ordinance is the key, because this way we don't have to put on the sign, this is a $250 fine, this is a handicap spot, and you will comply, or, the penalties are based on our ordinance.
I know that Steve's been in conversation with them. I wasn't updated for it today, so well, let us do a little briefing as to where we are today and if there is some things we can do in the future to make sure it's very clear and consistent.
And we have a sign shop.
Yeah, once again, these are, for the most part, are private parking lots. And these are signs that would be a code enforcement issue as far as requiring them to have the appropriate signs in their private parking lot. This isn't a city sign issue, unless it's one of our parking lots. And then if it's one of our parking lots, then yes, we would do that ourselves.
Maybe we can upgrade the signage act costs, though.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So if you could bring this back at our next meeting, I think it's fine.
Yeah, we'll take a look at it and get back to you. I can't promise you that it's going to be, next meeting, but if not, it'll be soon.
Like a simple ask. I appreciate it. Is that all?
that's all I had.
Councilmember Clufus?
No matters at this time. Thank you.
Okay. I just had a quick comment. And maybe Mark Harmon can answer it. I haven't heard what the plan is. If we were to ever have what happened in the shooting down south of us as a community, my heart goes out to all the people and parents that had to deal with those tragic circumstances. And I know we don't have jurisdiction over the, schools, but we do represent a substantial amount of families that do have children in the school systems. And do we have a coordinated plan? And has the sheriff reached out as far as how his response would be in those circumstances, as providing that safety and structure in our schools?
And I am going to let Mark, but while he's coming up, I can tell you that we've actually had a drill at one of our schools a couple of years ago or so. But Mark, can you give the...
To answer the mayor's question, Ms. Lannon, right after this happened, the sheriff went ahead and put deputies at each school, presence at every school, and we got a lot of positive feedback on it. We really appreciate it. One of the things we're doing is we're looking at working with the school board and giving some active shooter presentations to them. It's in the works right now. We've, Flagler County, I will give this to Mr. Lannon, you are the only city in the state of Florida that I'm aware of that the city manager made it mandatory for the staff to have active shooter presentation training. And we're actually in the process of doing, since we've done it, it was about a little over a year ago, every employee that's been hired since, we just set up a date to give them training on it. So even the new employees coming in are going to get it. And so we're still in the works. He's got some plans coming up for us to, I can't give all our tactics out, but he has some tactics, he has some plans, and we are talking with the school board. And matter of fact, we're doing a class, me and Sergeant Lutz, Thursday at one of the Richard Meadows real estate building. So we've got about 6 or 7 coming up. These have been ongoing, and then after something like this happens, of course, we get more and more requests. But we've updated our presentations, we've updated our training. Our deputies receive training on how to handle it, and we're trying to get out. One of the things he's done that's been real good and real receptive is the churches. Going out and doing threat assessment to all the churches in Palm Coast, Flagler County, working with the school board. So yeah, he's taking it serious. Mr. Landon's taking it serious. So,
Ask a question? Commander, what are we doing, or is the sheriff putting together some sort of plan to stop it versus react to it?
well, he's got a lot of ideas. He's talked to us about it. At all our events, if you notice, we've really beefed up any security. He started what's called a Homeland Security Division. We're actually, believe it or not, we are actually meeting today on events at 1 o'clock, and he's beefed up that department. So yeah, he's at all our events within the city and the county. You've seen, and if you may not have seen it, there's actually security out there. So yeah, he's taking steps.
Okay, because I mean, the only thing that bothers me in this current scenario is that this kid just walked into school, you know, with a gun. And now, granted, it's easy to hide guns here and there and stuff. I know that, but an AR, you know, a rifle. I mean, he walked into the school. It seemed like if the school was locked down a little bit more. You know, so getting in the school, locking the kids in the room, teachers with guns, I'm not a fan of, but keeping them from getting in the school, seems to be the optimal.
One of the directions he just gave to me personally was to go ahead and put together a scaled-down version of what we've done to the city employees and what we're doing, and go ahead and not soften it, but, you know, we're not trying, there's a saying when we do it, we're not trying to scare you, we're trying to prepare you and do something. Some of the stuff down in South Florida, you know, they did what they were trained to do. If you read up on it, they did a lot of, some did, some didn't. And I'm not going to critique them or whatever, or say anything bad about them. Some of it worked and some of it didn't. We just
Well, I think the problem was, and, you know, quite frankly, with social media today, it's hard to track sort of comments that are being made, or sort of a moment in time where it's hindsight is 50-50, when you're looking back and going, yeah, that was a pretty apparent moment that this individual had some serious mental health issues. I know, in speaking with the sheriff, they do monitor social media actively, regularly, to look and address some of those comments too. To Councilmember Nobil's point, yeah, taking a proactive approach. I think we had a presentation on mental health issues and trying to be more proactive with people that are suffering, that may have some serious issues going on that we're not really aware of. But for the shooting, I remember way back when I did my radio show and you were on, and I remember this was after, I think, Sandy Hook shooting, and you had said, the scary part is, after these, is the increase of gun sales and the people that aren't trained, that are now armed. And so I think that's apparent in this circumstance, that we're seeing a lot more of that as well. And that's a pretty scary situation, especially when they're not trained.
I will say this, Mayor, and I truly believe this. I believe we're the most proactive, one of the most proactive counties and city as looking into this, because we've been on this for years, and we've trained, me and Mike Lutz have done over 1,100 people have attended our classes, and we're still going, and of course, when this happens, we got more and more. We've got like 5 or 6 dates coming up, and after Mr. Landon made it mandatory for the city employees, the county then did it. And I guess,
Well,
And I think
flattery,
for having a safety plan for us at City Hall is important for our employees due to the fact that, I mean, when I was down in Orlando meeting with the mayor a few months ago, you talk about limited access. I had to do, I thought they were going to ask for my DNA to get into the building. It was so locked down as a government building. Anybody can walk in here at any time, which is quite alarming.
If I could say this, Mayor, I'm meeting with Chief Beadle and Chief Forte tomorrow. We have a meeting following up on Ms. Lennon's directions on, when we did the active shooter presentation, that was just one step. We have activation plan. We're still in the process of doing it, and we have a meeting tomorrow, actually, as you're saying all this. And this was all brought before this happened down in Parkland. So this wasn't something we're just reacting to. We have been proactive, and we're going to continue. And now we're even beefing up more. Like I said, the sheriff's he's beefed up the security at events. He's made a Homeland Security thing. He's talking with the school board. So I think he's really trying, I think we're way ahead of most places, and we're going to continue to do so.
Well, we support you guys 1,000,000%, and we're counting on your department to back us up. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. All set.
Thank you. Okay, agenda item number L is discussion by city attorney of matters not on the agenda.
Nothing to report, Mayor.
What?
Always a disappointment.
M is discussion by city manager of matters not on the agenda.
it's springtime. I guess it'd be the theme of what Cindy has sent to me today is come March, we're kicking off a lot of our spring events in Parks and Recreation, including the very popular Food Truck Tuesday, which is March 20th here in the Central Park area, and then Movies in the Park on March 9th, Friday, March 9th at 7:45 or right at dusk. But the big event that you can all put on your calendar now, because we have finalized the grand opening date for our community center, which is going to be March 23rd, which is a Friday at 5 p.m. And that is actually when after the ribbon cutting, the center will open, we'll have tours, et cetera, and then the next day, Saturday, the 24th, we'll offer tours and really just kick off the community center. So something very exciting. Mayor, that's all I have.
How did our birding fest go?
That was great.
Yeah?
Yeah, we actually, it was very exciting, very good. Mr. Cuff brought it up at the workshop last week about how we are getting bigger and better every year in the attendance. Got a lot of very positive feedback. In fact, it's getting bigger than what we actually have the resources for. So we're trying to figure out how we're going to bring in necessary resources to continue to grow it.
Allow it to spread its wings.
Yes. Yes.
Okay. Too early?
Too early, right? Tough crowd.
Okay. Vice Mayor?
Move to adjourn.